Hello and welcome into the Wild Tales podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bona, and I'm really excited about today's guests. Today I have Dr. Greg Rasmussen from Painted Dog Research Organization in Zimbabwe. Greg is the founder and president, and I had the pleasure of talking to him while he was making a tour of zoos and other cities throughout the United States, giving talks and spreading knowledge about the painted dogs. Don't call them wild dogs. We get into that during the interview. But I got to talk to Greg while he was staying in Colorado. And let me just say, we may have had better internet connection if he was in Zimbabwe. It was not good. So actually, this interview we ended up doing over the phone because we could not get a stable internet connection to do my typical interview. So we'll not have any video clips for my social media like I typically do. But I do think I did a decent job adjusting the audio so it sounds good enough to listen to. So I hope you guys enjoy. These are a fascinating species. If you don't know anything about wild dogs, you're in for a treat. They are a fascinating animal. And really, do not underestimate the painted dog. I just called them a wild dog a minute ago. Shame on me. And you'll know why. That's a shame on me in a minute. They are the beautiful painted dogs, and this was a great interview talking with Greg. So let's get into it. Please welcome Dr. Greg Rasmussen of Painted Dog Research.
All right, Mike.
All right, let's roll into this. Now that we
Before we lose each other.
Okay, we'll get started. All right, Greg. Well, thank you for hopping on and joining me with your crazy schedule. It seems like you're hopping all over the world right now. I really want to get into what stories you have to tell, but first, let me just have you kind of talk about for our listeners. You are the executive director and the founder of the Painted Dog Research Trust. Now, I still hear people to this day refer to painted dogs as wild dogs. That's more of an outdated term. Can you kind of explain the difference between the change between wild dogs and painted dogs?
There's a story that goes that when I started to first work with painted dogs, they were indeed called wild dogs. And I used to be working in Wangi National Park, and I hadn't really thought much about the name or its origin until Australians used to pass me by, and I thought they were taking the mickey out of me when they see my book, Wangi Wild Dog Research on it. And they say, "Good day, mate. You do feral dog control?" And I thought they were joking or trying to pull my tail, as they say in English. I checked out wild dog in Australia. Is an official term for a feral dog to be shot on sight. But they genuinely thought I was driving around Wangi National Park looking for feral dogs to shoot to keep the game safe. And so against that background, I then started to research what was the origin of the name wild dog. Well, the first name ever given to the painted dog was the painted Lycaon, because they're not a true dog as many people think they are. And the name, when they started the persecution, like they persecuted the wolves, they persecuted painted dogs. Hundreds of thousands were shot all over Africa. They changed the name then to justify the slaughter. A bit like, we have derogatory terms for human races. It's exactly the same. It's almost like a racial slur. And so they were doing it, changed the name to bloody wild dog, just justify the slaughter. And so when I looked it up, that's where it all happened. It happened in 1900. So it was complete misnomer. The other thing is, let's face it, we don't have a wild camel and a wild this and wild that. They're a truly unique species, all of their own, and a wild dog gives the connotation that there's some feral dog gone wild, even to this day. And it conjures up imagination of some savage, ruthless killer, which of course they're not. And that's when the museum in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe, they said to me, but it should be called a painted Lycaon, or at least a painted dog. And that's how the name changed. I spoke to someone in marketing. They said, you must be nuts if you want to call a dog a wild dog. Forget about trying to market it, brand it. So that's how the name changed.
I think it's beautiful. I think painted dogs are very much a more appropriate name because they are beautiful animals and look like they are just painted by an artist because they each have their own unique.
Exactly. I mean, wild dog tells you nothing about the species. And just a few people diehards hang on to because they kind of like the feel of it. They think that, oh, wild sounds great. But actually, to most of the population, the name wild dog is still to this day in Australia. A wild dog is a feral dog to be shot on sight, government listed as such. So it creates this layer of confusion. And indeed, they are painted. The scientific name translates as the painted wolf-like animal. Well, and that's why the name painted originally in the 1840s came into being.
Very well. That's great. That's very interesting information about the origin of wild dog and painted dog. So let's get into the wild tales of the podcast. Do you have any stories you'd like to share about your work with the painted dogs?
Well, let me share a segue to what we've just talked about, which kind of fits in very nicely.
Please do.
My background is that I started to work with reptiles all my life as a kid. About 11 years old, I used to go into the Natural History Museum in Zimbabwe, which is where I grew up. Spent my school holidays with the curator, and I spent all my life when I was working with wildlife and nature was always snakes, cobras, puff adders, mambas, and any other snakes that I could work with. And so when I was asked to help with a project 38 years ago on wild dogs, as it was then called, I contacted my mum, who was in England, and said, "Oh, mum, I'm going to work with wild dogs." And she said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." She said, "But are they not dangerous?" Because the name wild immediately comes in her imagination that they were wild, savage animals.
Yeah.
So if you went to a library and got a fictional book out, a book that was fiction but made to sound like it was real, called Wild Dogs Running, and it talks about chapters in there, we're talking about packs of painted dogs that would kill a horse and kill the horse that the rider was on, and the rider just escaped with his life. It made them out to be the most evil, savage creatures. Then my mum contacted me, and she said, "Greg, I think you better go back to working with cobra pup adders and mambas. Much safer than working with these bloody wild dogs."
That's something I would say.
Yeah. So anyway, so I didn't know. Of course, not going to tell her. Well, I know nothing. So I just said, "No, that's fine. I'm sure that just stories, mum, just stories." And but then I had an incident quite early on with the painted dog. I used to follow them for 28 days in a row in the field with just me, my Land Rover, and my radio tracking equipment. And I'd sleep at night as close to the dogs as I possibly could without interfering with them. And I'd sleep really close. And the radio collar had a signal change when the dog started moving. So 5 in the morning, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, the radio collar signal changed the signal to me that the dogs were active. And so of course I get up, and the first thing I want to do in the morning is go to the restroom. Of course, in the bush there is no such thing as a restroom; you just go anywhere. And so I get to the awkward position, when your trousers are down by your ankle, and the whole pack of dogs appear, 11 of them, full adults. And they all came, and I'm squatting down there, and they looked at me, and they started to approach me, and I thought, well, there's nothing I can do. I can't bunny hop away. There's no running out of this game when your ankles are tied by a pair of trousers. And so they came close, and they formed a complete circle around me. They came so close that had I wanted to, I could almost have touched them. And I thought, well, Mum, we're going to find out now And I think I added a bit to my pile and the smell drove me away.
They're there.
And they just walked away. They were just curious.
They're there for the
Then
show,
I
right?
started to think, yeah. So then I wrote to Mum, dear Mum, all that stuff you read about them was absolute BS, you know? And it was a moment, and then again, it was very early on in my working with the dog. And then I realized that nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, I have had an instance where I was lying down photographing a pack of dogs and near a kill. And one of them just came right up to me and nose to nose. And I was just lay down turned on my belly. I'm like, I couldn't believe what I was finding was happening. So the name Wild Dog, nothing could be further from the truth. It's the most ridiculous name, you know?
I agree.
So that was my early encounter. Then, of course, what it led was that I started to really dig into the truth about painted dogs. And in those days, the only thing true, we're talking nearly 40 years ago now, the only thing true that was written in literature was that they ate meat and they lived in packs. And they were vilified in every corner. They were labeled savage, ruthless killers. But that's the image that the ranchers and those that didn't like them wanted to portray. You know, it's like if you don't like particular groups, you know, you vilify them, and people have done exactly the same for the painted dog. And then quite early on, there's another story that really showed more than anything what painted dogs truly were. Because everyone was saying that the reason there were so few of them, because when I started in Zimbabwe, there were definitely less, 150 to 200 dogs countrywide, which is not very many. And the second they left the sanctuary of the national park, they were slaughtered by the ranchers within weeks. And in fact, my first study pack was 24 dogs that left the park, and a week later it reduced to 4. 20 were shot, and then the 4 just died out because they couldn't survive. It's a small unit, such a small unit. So I was following a pack, and people were saying, we were asking, saying they're endangered. Oh yeah, well it's lions and hyenas. The fact that the ranchers were shooting the hell out of them, and they were shot on sight, had nothing to do with it. Of course it did. And so I was following a pack of dogs called the Shamwari pack, and they were wherever they went, I went. And one evening I was following them in my vehicle with my radio antenna stuck out the window, and I suddenly stopped, and I heard about 200 yards in the bush, I heard an interaction with painted dog and the pack, the Shamwari pack, and lion. So I get in as best as I can, push the vehicle in to see what was going on, because it seemed a bit silly to walk in. And lying on the ground was a dog called Olna. And I get out the car, look at him, take one look at him, and basically he was as good as dead. He couldn't lift his head. His eyes were glazed over. He'd been mauled by a lion by the neck, given a good shaking. And I backed off so as not to stress the animal out, and got to a point where I radioed for a vet. And the vet said, Greg, well, there's not really much I can do at 6:30 in the evening. She said, look, the best I can do, he said, go back at first light. And if the dog is still breathing, he said, radio me and we'll see if we can come. It's 2 or 3 hour journey to get to you where I was. And I said, okay. So sure enough, 5 o'clock in the morning, I walked back to the spot, and there's just a drag mark. There's no dog. Looked like the carcass had been dragged by maybe hyenas or even the lion itself. And the pack was already up and gone. So there's no sign of the pack. So I thought, well, that's it. The pack was 10 now. The pack was 11, now it's 10. And, well, very sad, obviously. It was my first death other than the pack would be sort of my first, what I thought was a natural death. Anyway, so I continued to follow the pack. Then after a few days, I started to notice that at about 9:30, when the pack came back from hunting, 9 to 10 in the morning, one dog, particular dog called Circus, who I've actually written a children's book about, Circus would disappear. And every morning or every other morning, I'd notice he was going somewhere. Normally they sleep at that time of day. So after about a few days, about a week of this behavior, I'm like, I can't stand it anymore. I've got to know, where is Circus going every day? So I go, he didn't have a collar, so I deployed a foot tracker, and the pair of us set off tracking on foot, trying to find out where Circus went. And the tracker stayed with me for 2 days until finally we saw Circus disappear. We had a starting point. So we walked and we walked and we walked for hours, and we got to a point that was about 8 miles away, 7 or 8 miles away. And tracker said, well, he'd gone somewhere, and he'd come back on the same track. So wherever he's going is close. So we proceed forward, and we get to a thicket of bushes, and I couldn't believe my eyes. There, under the thicket, was Circus's brother Ulmer. Circus had been going back to his brother every day, every other day, to lick and clean his wounds and feed him. And he was when I worked it out later, and it was close to the point where he'd been injured. So what had actually happened was the dogs had dragged Ulmer away into a safe place collectively, and Circus had gone back every day to feed his brother. Well, that was the first time record ever of a wild animal taking care of its sick and its weak. And Circus didn't do this for 2 weeks. He did it for 3 months until Ulmer could stand up and walk with the pack. And that gives you some idea how bad the wound was. It took 3 months of dog care to put him back together again.
Wow, that is incredible.
That just blew me away.
Yeah, it definitely puts a whole new light on these animals and their perspective of just wildlife in general, but especially with the painted dogs, that they'd go through that effort to help heal one of their own.
And now I wondered whether it was a singular event. And the more I studied it over the last 38 years I've been doing the work, it wasn't a singular event. I've had other cases where single dog has taken on the role of being doc for the pack and looking after. In fact, we had one case where 5 members of the pack were injured in a big punch-up with lions, and the dogs were protecting their pups. And when they're protecting their pups against lions, they'll give lions a good beating. They've no fear whatsoever. They're fearless. They're so fearless. They're amazing. Encouragingly, there's no runaway, and they'll stand to the end. And 5 dogs were badly injured, and there's one dog that wasn't. And there was one dog was badly injured. I had to be giving antibiotic injections remotely by a dart. But obviously, antibiotic injections remotely by a dart are painful. So when I gave it to the dog the first time, one of the other dogs was designated, clearly looking after the 5 dogs. And this dog, next time I tried to place the dart in him, he shadowed the dog. He made absolutely sure I couldn't get a second shot in. I mean, it was just unbelievable, and it was so noticeable. Every time the truck appeared, this dog would stand up and lie over his brother. I mean, they're just incredible. They're just, they're mind-blowing species, and I think that's part of why I made it my life's crusade to do what I could for painted dogs. But here was the species that was maligned and persecuted, and definitely badly maligned.
It certainly would inspire most people, and that definitely goes against the wild dog reputation that they had, that they're caring, nurturing, amazing animals in that manner.
Yeah, and then so they order of priorities. Sick and weak get looked after. Young eat first, unlike many species. Lions, for example. I know lions. Every species has a strategy. But lions, when food is short, the males take the loss. I mean, in Painted Dog Society, the pups feed first. And I even had a case where poachers had accidentally, not deliberately, but they'd set snare bushmeat and they'd killed the adults in the pack, leaving one adult. And this one dog remaining starved himself so he could try and feed the pups. But in the end, that didn't work because then he couldn't hunt because he was so starving. And we get these situations. But the dogs are just exemplary, and they're the only species. Now, here's something that I was saying in some of my presentations. They are the only species that we know of that where their conflict is so minimal, little as it almost non-existent. And how do they manage that? They don't fight in packs that I've studied. They're not fighting for dominance and alpha status. The alphas are chosen democratically. It seems by the pups already know by the time they're 12 months old which dog they're going to have as their leader. If it's a male, and which dog is a female, and they share leadership. And they have this amazing greeting ceremony where every single day, every dog seems to greet each other about 10 times a day. And I call it preemptive conflict resolution. It's basically, how do you maintain wonderful social bonds? Well, you just greet each other a lot so that then de-escalates any potential stress in the pack.
Well, it certainly sounds like humans can learn a lot from painted dogs.
Oh, we could learn a ton. Can you imagine a world where there's no conflict? Gosh.
I wish I could.
Yeah, I wish I could too.
So,
Yeah, so they're just exemplary, and they're so good at what we call division of labor. Within the pack, obviously you've got, like in any situation, in people, you've got some who've got different skill sets. And they're very good seemingly within the pack to recognize which dog has got which skill set, and then where he fits into the daily life chores, whether it's babysitting, pup guarding, whether it's helping hunt, or whether it's leading the hunt. And they're just so good at that. And we have what we call gamma dogs, which are, you may say gamma is low ranking, but in Painted Dog Society, gamma just means that they have the role they do it. Everyone shares what you do. And I had a dog called Magellan. The Magellan story was, he was clearly a gamma dog. If he was born in a wolf pack, he'd probably be kicked out as a run because he wasn't fulfilling a function. And he was always lost on every hunt. And that was why I called him Magellan, after the great explorer. And you may say it's a bit of a misnomer. Well, actually, it turned out the Magellan Corporation, all those years ago, donated me 2 GPS units that didn't work. I figured the GPS units and the dog were about as good as each other.
Pudding.
And I did write to the corporation to say, could they replace them, saying we'd name dog after them, but we didn't say why, but they never even responded.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
They probably made more money out of marketing as they donated something to a conservation organization than we did. Then we benefited. But anyway, Magellan was always late on every hunt, and he lost. So he'd come at the end when the dogs had already killed something and all filled their belly. They can't leave food on the plate. They have to get it in the belly safe from lions and hyenas, and that's why they eat so far. Works the treat. By the time the lions and hyenas come, there's nothing left to eat. So here you can have the scrap, but there aren't any. And Magellan would arrive, and they'd all be like, oh, here he comes again. And they'd all ask them all for food. They'd all give him a share. They'd regurgitate a share for him. And I still used to think, well, what's the role that Magellan got? But sure enough, when it came to denning season, when they have their pups, when it's fairly safe, they always need to leave a pack member behind just to alert the pups if lions or hyenas or leopards arrive. And Magellan would get the job when it was fairly safe. But then they could have a dog that didn't have to go anywhere and wouldn't disrupt the hunt. So they're just very good at choosing. So yeah, they're pretty amazing animals. They've kept me amazed for many years, and I'm still amazed by them. How smart they are, how organized they are, and actually with their whole ecology. Probably what to me one of the most fascinating species. Probably because I've studied it with such depth. The more depth you study something, the more interesting it becomes.
Yeah, they sound fascinating. So let me ask you, you said you've been working with them for over 40 years. How have their image improved with the people that share their habitats?
Well, here's the rub. I had this vision all those years ago, a little statement ditty in my head, that I wanted to turn them from perceived pest to best loved animal in 40 years. Well, for the first 13 years, I was working a lot close alongside with the ranchers and against the ranchers to try and stop the shooting. It took me 13 years, but in the year 2000, the last painted dog in Zimbabwe was shot. I.e., not the last one that existed, but the ranchers put their guns down. And from that day on in Zimbabwe, there no painted dogs had been shot by ranchers. So that's a plus. I mean, that's nearly over 20 something years. That's 25 years of no shooting, and in the whole countrywide.
That's incredible. That's a huge success. Yeah.
And that's never that success has not been emulated anywhere else in the world, like for wolves or something like another species close, or for painted dogs for that matter. So that was one success, but slowly but surely the public started to change their perception of the painted dog. And, they're a must-see animal on the tourist run. People want to see painted dogs. Locally, people see painted dogs as a benefit rather than a scourge. So there have been huge changes in their perception. When I started, now they are especially protected within Zimbabwe at a government level. In the early days, when I started, they were still on the vermin list. Can you believe it?
Wow. Yeah.
So you can't have a painted dog on the vermin list. You can have a wild dog on the vermin list.
But not a painted dog. I believe that certainly has to give you optimism about their future.
Oh, it does. The only problem is them having solved the challenge with the ranchers. I sort of thought, well, that's it. My work is done. Oh no. We've got different challenges today. Obviously, habitat loss is one that affects not just painted dogs but all species. We've got two other major challenges. One is wildlife vehicle collisions. People have no idea the damage they do wildlife with vehicle collisions, and people drive like I call them petrol heads, and they think they can drive fast and they kill wild. Oh, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. In the case of painted dogs, if we get one or two key dogs killed from a pack, particularly an alpha, the whole pack collapses, all the pups die. And then the pack doesn't survive. So roadkill is my number one killer that's visible. And the silent killer of painted dogs is disturbance at den by tourists, film crews, and in some cases people saying they're doing research. Going to the den and causing the pups aren't getting fed properly. The activity of the dogs are changing, and they're not doing their natural stuff. And therefore, what happens is the pups aren't getting fed the way they should be, and they need to grow really, really fast. Because the 12 weeks old, these little pups go nomadic, and they'll often go up to 5-10 miles a day. They're just incredible species.
Yes, the work of a conservationist is never done.
No, I wish it was, but it won't be.
Well, those are some amazing stories. Hopefully I think that should inspire my listeners to want to learn more about painted dogs. If someone wants to learn more about painted dogs, your organization, and where to donate, where can they go?
PaintedDogResearch.org.
PaintedDogResearch.org. I'll have a link in the show notes.
We are a USA 501c3 nonprofit. So if people want to make donations that are tax deductible, that can happen as well.
I encourage everyone to please, donate or at least follow, learn something about painted dogs, and share with your friends.
Yeah, follow our newsletter. I think there's a sign-up page on our website somewhere. And they can also, I mentioned the dog circus. We're going to be launching, we've got a book called A Dog Called Circus, which was that very dog I was talking about, and his brother. And another of his incredible exploits, which we haven't got time to talk about. But we've got a children's book called The Dog Called Circus out. And for $25, whatever it is, a copy, people could support that way.
I think I might go online and buy myself a book myself. That sounds fascinating.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg. It sounds like you have a lot more stories you want to tell, so hopefully I can have you on again in the future.
I'm sure we can pull that one off.
All right. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye.
Greg.
Go well.
All right.
Yeah.
You too.
Bye.
Big thanks to Greg for joining the podcast this week. He was such a delight to talk to. He has such amazing stories about amazing animals. Painted dogs. They are incredible. They are beautiful. They are smart. They are social animals. Surprisingly intelligent. They're great animals to learn about. Follow Painted Dog Research on all their social medias. I will post links in the show notes. Get yourself a book. A dog named Circus. Can't wait to get myself a copy. My kids, I believe, have outgrown kids' books, but not me. I'll get a copy for me to read. That's just my reading level. Is Dog Named Circus, Cat in the Hat. That's where I'm at right now. So I'm looking forward to getting myself a copy of the book. I will have a link to the book in the show notes as well, so you guys can get yourself a copy. Follow the podcast on social media if you haven't already at Wild Tales Pod on Instagram, just Wild Tales on Blue Sky. Do you have Substack? Look for the Wild Tales Podcast for more content there. Email the show, wildtalespod@gmail.com. I've been getting some delightful emails. Please just shoot me a line. Just say hi. I listen. Let me know what part of the world you're in. I'd love to find out where all you beautiful listeners are tuning in from. And yeah, by the way, that's all Tails, Tails. So thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'll be back 2 weeks with another great guest. Until next time, stay wild, my friends.